So the Friends and Family Test review, and we went into this after 6 months of the Friends and Family Test, which clearly had a lot of publicity around it. The first thing to point out, it's not doing everything that everyone wanted it to do. Let's be absolutely clear. The other thing is that it is clearly making an impact. The vast majority of experiences in the NHS are very, very positive. And yes, it might show where things aren't working, but let's also be aware of a nurse that was spoken to as part of the review said, until the Friends and Family Test, I often didn't know what I was doing well and what I wasn't doing well. You don't just work with people and tell them what they're doing wrong the whole time. Sometimes it's saying, that was really good, keep doing it. The big thing here is that there's significant concerns about the methodology in terms of comparability. And the review that we've come out with, we're clearly stating that statistically is not comparable between trusts. And there is a balance here to be struck between usability and robustness of the data. So the inpatient survey, which is robust, rigorously collected, we could say is statistically comparable, is published 6 months after the data was collected. To contrast that with the Friends and Family Test, one of the examples that was given, that was a consultant in A&E, said, look, at the end of the day, 20 pieces of feedback. Great, great, great. Make sure we feed that back to the staff. Well done today. Toys are dirty in the children's area. Fix. Now, that might not sound like very much, but actually there's lots of examples of small incremental changes that are coming across as a result of direct feedback. Having said that, there's various things where we thought actually we can do better, and there are things that aren't working as well as they should, things to make the data more accurate and useful. The follow-up question is absolutely key. So the why. Why was it that you strongly agreed? And actually you get people who have really said the experience was fantastic, the nurses were great, the doctors were great, the staff were great, but they had something really useful to feed back on what could have been better, and they're still given a positive score. Some of the best solutions we've seen by some margin are people who have gone away and tried to work out how best to do it themselves within a trust. And there's some really interesting examples of how that's being done. Having said that, we do think there's some guidance that needs to be given on kind of framing and priming devices. And the other one is this idea of gaming the system. And again, interesting for me when you come into the thing, the idea that people think the NHS is constantly gaming everything. So, there's a few things you can do. First of all, you take away the idea there's financial incentives attached to it on relative performance, which we've clearly done. We are not suggesting that payments be attached to inter-trust comparisons. The data is not robust enough for that. The other one is that the way that it was set up was a net promoter score, which is if you take your promoters and detractors and you subtract them and you get a score of plus 100 to minus 100, and then you communicate out that we got a score of 45 in the abstract, it just doesn't work. You're not communicating back to the people who've taken the time to give you the feedback. If you say 80% of people would recommend this trust, that sounds great. If you say 1 in 10 people would be extremely unlikely to recommend this trust, that's something to think about. If you look at ward to board, it is being used at ward, it is being used by board. There is a gap in between. And there is an issue around clinicians here and ownership of data. And that's partly around a ward and owning what that means. And we can talk about sample sizes, etc. Sometimes for me, 5 people giving you absolutely clear feedback on one thing that could change within a ward is enough for you to think that that might be a good thing to be doing. Where it works well is that it's absolutely, you are proximate to the data, but you are more importantly perhaps proximate to the solution to the thing that's being raised. A really good way of thinking about FFT is that you're using that to constantly improve, and once a year you will know whether you've improved because the inpatient survey will happen. We're going to test this with people to understand, well, what is a good way of conveying this back? Steps taken to ensure accessibility for all within our guidance. The methods have been tightened up to make the data more useful, but we're not standardising. If you think about the inpatient survey, and what it does is it draws a sample out, and it allows the trust to do nothing else with that sample, and that's right because you reduce all biases. FFT is subject to almost every bias that there is going in terms of survey work. But what we think is it's not useful to apply the tools that you would apply to survey work to the Friends and Family Test. It's almost being seen through the wrong prism, and that hasn't helped it in terms of its initial reception. So in terms of the sort of comparability, what we are interested in and working with CQC on is that actually within a trust, there will be various biases, but they will remain constant within that trust. And so actually, performance over time within that trust on FFT is very helpful. And just to be clear, I think the other thing is, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. And if we're going to hit 5 million pieces of feedback in February, which we will, we have to listen to it. Thank you very much.